moment that I knew you were coming to South by with this film. What an extraordinary story, what an extraordinary subject. Nadia is 23 years old?
Mm-hmm. A little older now. Now she's 24, right? 24 now.
We'll watch the trailer in a second, but how did you find this story?
Well, actually, Hayley brought the film to me in July of 2016. Do you want to talk about how you...
Yeah, so we had done a couple news pieces on the Yazidi genocide, and we had interviewed Luis Moreno Ocampo, who, was giving legal counsel to Nadia. And they came back to us in early 2016 saying, the story is, Nadia's work is getting traction, the story is getting traction, what more could we do? We proposed a documentary and immediately reached out to Alexandria. She was the first person and only person really that we wanted to work with to tell this story.
And why is that?
I think a few things. I love her work, her approach to storytelling in film, and we wanted it to be a character-driven piece, not necessarily a news-type piece, but one that was sensitive with nuance, and I felt that no one could do that better.
So to give a little background on Alexandria, she also made a film that I love very much called Frame by Frame. And just tell us briefly what that one's about. Because again, you're riding the edge with that film.
Yeah. Frame by Frame is about Afghan photojournalists in Afghanistan, and it premiered here actually at South by Southwest in 2015. So yeah, it was led me into really being interested in storytelling and how we tell stories, and that was actually what I was most interested in when Hayley brought Nadia's story to me, because she's telling her story over and over and over again, and I was very interested in the idea of how we tell stories of trauma.
I understand that you didn't start filming. Well, actually, you know what? Let's take a look at the trailer. Then I'll ask this question. All right, this is the trailer for On Her Shoulders.
أنا ناجية من الإبادة اليزيدية ولاجئة الآن.
Nadia Murad is campaigning to try to get the world to notice and do something.
Yet she tells the story again and again of how she became an ISIS sex slave.
Although she's the strongest person I've ever seen, I don't know how much more strength she has.
Only hope for all of us is Nadia Murad.
What do you hope to give to the Yazidi people?
I would like to see justice to be done for Yazidis.
I now give the floor to Miss Nadia Murad Basi Taha.
So what I felt like I'm watching somebody who was deeply victimized, who lost everyone in her life to ISIS, and somehow by repeating her story gains this kind of almost another life, or some kind of other. She is thrust into the public eye. She's thrust into celebrity. There's a lot more going on, but at the end of the day, her heart is there still with those people. And so it was really interesting taking that journey. I think my question, what I was going to say before the trailer, was you came into this about, I think, 8 months after her first. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. She had given her first UN speech in 2015 in December, and that's what kind of made her the face of the Yazidis. And when we started filming it, it was July of 2016. So she was in the middle of her campaign, and we kind of followed her in an interesting time of her campaign where things were moving very quickly. She was meeting with a lot of leaders. At that point, she had been to like 23 countries telling her story to politicians and media, and things were going really quickly. And this is all leading up to her becoming a UN ambassador. And really the experience of it was following her as she's, kind of seeing what impact her story has and maybe the lack thereof. And a bit of the film, and she talks about what questions people are asking her, like how did they rape you, what did they do to you, versus asking what can be done. And so there's a conversation there about just how we're approaching these stories of trauma, making victims into activists.
And where did you come out with that? Because it's really interesting seeing people kind of dance around how do we talk about the horrors that have happened to you, yet it's a natural thing, I think, for journalists to want to get into the meat of the matter. And along those lines, as a filmmaker, and I've been there before myself, you know, there's times when you want to put the camera down and throw your arms around your subject or pick them up off the floor, and you sort of need to keep rolling. So tell me about that relationship.
I think that was probably the hardest thing for me in this film. As a documentary filmmaker, it made me question everything that I am and everything that I do, which I think is important, and the film speaks to that in so many different ways. And I don't want to pretend that I have an answer for exactly how we should approach these things, but I think it's important that we think critically about it. And I think there's a lot of gray area there where there were many moments where I wanted to put down the camera or not ask Nadia to put a mic on, but you know, and some days she just did it, and I was like, that's cool, whatever you need. But in other times, it's like, yeah, these stories need to be told. I just think we should be critically thinking about what questions we're asking and why we're asking them, to separate sensationalism from actual storytelling to make an impact.
Yeah, and there's this human being there. She constantly has her hand here, just sort of, I feel like she's trying to hold some, it's not integrity because she's full of integrity. It's just what is sacred, almost,
self-preservation.
Right? Self-preservation.
Yeah, we saw, you know, the interviews and the work takes so much from her, that there's a lot of self-preservation that she has to do to take care of herself. And we watched every single interview. She'd walk away, you know, drained and emotionally exhausted, and it's a lot.
What happened to her? Can you just tell us basically what happened?
Yeah, in August 3rd of 2014, ISIS started a very calculated genocide campaign against the Yazidi people. And the Yazidis are a religious minority. They're non-Muslim in Kurdistan in northern Iraq. And they killed thousands and thousands of men and older women. And they kidnapped, I think it was 7,000 women and children into captivity, and the women were used as sex slaves. And so Nadia was kidnapped along with all these other women. They were sold in markets. They were given out to different members of ISIS, and they even had pamphlets of explaining what you can and can't do with your sex slave. And at that time, I'm sure you can imagine, she just felt, and all Yazidis felt, very abandoned, because, and even still now, there's so many people that don't know that this happened. She escaped. She was a part of a program that Germany had to bring victims of sexual slavery to Germany for psychiatric help and getting them help for everything. And she kind of didn't do that therapy and just felt like she wanted to talk about what happened, to get the word out. She wanted people to know. And there's a lot of survivor's guilt because there's still 3,500 people in captivity or missing, and even including family members that Nadia has. And so it's hard to stop. It's hard to stop the work when you know that that's going on. And so that was something I wanted to explore as well.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask you about that, because we see a few shots of you know, her town just leveled. And we see a return, but you made a choice as a director or producer, as a team. You didn't go back and forth as one might, right? You really didn't. You studied this girl's experience and stayed with her. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think I wanted to make the conscious choice to really only focus on the campaigning that she does, because honestly, there's been so many stories already, 60 Minutes and Vice, and all these people have done stories already about her story of being a sex slave. And for me, I wanted to take a deeper look into her repeating her story over and over again. What is it actually doing for change, and what is that experience like for her, so people get an idea of what it's like for a voiceless minority to try and have a voice, to try and get help. And for me, so it was important to be in her campaign with her wherever she was going. And I wanted to show that at the very end, because it is a reminder of what that place looks like now, so.
Yeah, but I would just add, I think the film follows a very specific period of time, and we wanted to stay within that period of time. You know, I think that the story and the issue and the landscape is so complex that we could have gone so many different directions, but it felt that the way we could do this most justice was by staying with her in that moment.
Everything, yeah, and the moment is the key part of that, where you're just wanting to be with her and seeing this experience through her eyes as much as possible. A lot of the cinematography is just staying very close, and I want you to feel that with her.
Yeah, not even trying to shorten, like she leaves the UN building and there's selfies and there's, you know, not really her selfieing, but there's people wanting to take her picture and she's just so drained. But you kind of just, you let us kind of be there with that experience. So it was just interesting in that regard. And how long did you film her for?
It was very short. We were there for maybe 2.5 months, 3 months, following her in her campaign.
Okay, wow, that is...
It's fast for a doc.
Did you frame by frame, how long was that?
Frame by frame was 3 years, and this one from start to premiere was 1.5 years. So I feel like the next film I might get cursed with like a 10-year film or something like that. But I mean, it was no breaks, no weekends, and the edit, of course, just full steam ahead to try and get it finished. But
And what's happened with her since?
she's continuing to do work. She's doing a lot of work right now on a thing called the Sinjar Action Fund, and about 30% of Yazidis have gone back to Sinjar, but what the big problem is now is the political stability. There's a lot of demining that needs to happen. There's a lot of mines in that area, and supporting an economy, making sure there's a hospital. There needs to be people putting money into rebuilding this place so Yazidis have a homeland and a place to go, because it's brought up in the film that, you know, there was a genocide in northern Iraq, but Europe is almost completing that genocide by splitting these Yazidis all over the world. And, you know, it's a complicated thing. It's very complicated, but having that homeland is so important to the future of this whole religion.
So it's like a diaspora.
Yeah.
Wow, so like the Jews in Israel.
Which they're so worried about because their numbers are nowhere near, there's only 1 million Yazidis in the world. So once that diaspora happens, they lose each other.
And Hayley, before this ends, and we don't talk about RYOT and what it's like as a woman running a company like that, tell me, it's not common, and you're very young. And what's this experience like, and what's the agenda for RYOT Films?
The experience is, it's a lot. It's great. I feel privileged to be in this position, and privileged to get to work with other strong women and be in a position where you can choose who you're working with and build that team around you. I have wonderful male coworkers as well, and I feel really supported by them and thankful for that. And I'm given a lot of leeway and freedom. I think where we want to go, you know, I think we want to continue telling important stories like this and character-driven stories and working with the right people to tell these stories. I don't think this film would have been anything close to what it is if we had worked with a different director. You know, I think that Alexandria was someone who was so absolutely in touch with the nuance and delicacy of both the subject matter and the individual and the way that we wanted to approach it, that I hope that we can continue to do that. Maybe women do it better, I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. You had 2 Oscar-nominated short films, both of which I really liked. But I should mention them, Body Team 12 and Watani, My Homeland. Again, looking at countries far, far away from here. Is that part of the agenda that Bryn and you have?
Yes and no. I think that, you know, Bran, our co-founder, was a humanitarian for years and did a lot of international work, and I think that we're drawn to those stories and happen to be enmeshed in those worlds as is. But I think that more than anything, we're interested in personal stories as a lens into these otherwise seemingly foreign worlds and cultures. And similar to Nadia, you know, I think that Yazidis are people that very few of us are even aware of, nonetheless could relate to, and that feels really important, that we're able to find these individuals that we can connect to on a human level.
Yeah, and to make them relatable. I mean, just, you know, it doesn't matter what you've been through, you're going to fall into feeling you actually have had these feelings that she's had. We've all had that. The anxiety and building the speech when you see her working on, you know, no, they are gonna cut me off if it's too long, you know? What was that relationship? I mean, such a short shooting time, a person who's been through such trauma.
I didn't really know what to expect when we first came on production, and I wanted to give her a lot of space. I think she was actually really excited that Hayley and I were there at first, because we were young women and she's working with amazing men, but still men. And so I remember I had to leave for a little bit to shoot at the DNC, and she was sending me like kissy face emojis and saying, "I miss you, where are you?" And so it was a really great connection. And I think, but the path of our connection kind of was the same as her understanding of media and her disappointment in the media that had been covering her and the lack of change that she was seeing. So about midway through the process, she was like, "Why are you still here? And what is the thing that you're doing?" And that's how it felt, you know. And so it became more and more apparent that she was just felt like maybe the film wasn't going to do anything, and what's going on. And then by the end, I'd been there so long with her that, you know, we had a close connection because I think she felt that I had been through all these things with her. So we were really close at the end again. But I'm thankful for that experience. And I think it's important to point out, because I'm not, you know, this film wasn't made because I had some special skill of access of getting close to Nadia. It's amazing because she's an amazing person, and we need to be transparent about access as filmmakers and how it can be very complex.
And now that you've covered this, is there something that comes next that kind of follows one of these themes?
I hope so. I mean, right now we just premiered at Sundance, and so I mean, the next year is going to be a lot of different screenings, as you know how that goes. So that's happening, but definitely have like 3 docs and a narrative that I'm just like chomping at the bit to make. And you know, I'd love to go back to Kurdistan and make a short that's more specifically about the Yazidis in Kurdistan right now. There's so much to do in so little time.
Much to do. I know, it's wild. And I mean, I think sex slavery, the sex trade, human trafficking is something that needs more of a spotlight on it. People need to understand how it happens. It doesn't just happen sometimes with an ISIS invasion. It can happen with literally, I know a person who was a UCLA student and got lured into modeling and ended up a sex slave. Yeah, it's pretty pervasive.
Yeah, and I think, very pervasive. And I think this story in particular, sexual slavery, was used as a tool of genocide. And that's something I feel like needs to be talked about more, that every genocide, this has been a thing, that we need to understand that that was a part of genocide, to erase their identity through sexual slavery.
That's one of the ways to do it.
Yeah.
To take the women and...
You're stripping away all their dignity and identity and cultural values.
I actually didn't know that. That's incredible. Well, thank you both. Congratulations, and thanks for doing the great work that you've done, and thank you for taking the time to come on WeTalk.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
All right.